Alright, welcome back to Fast Gadgets. So on this episode, what I need to do today is I'm going to install CentOS onto my AMD X2, actually it's an X6 with a 6-core processor, the 1055T. And currently I'm running Windows 10 on here, but I want to dual boot so that I can do my editing in Linux, which I've been doing more and more. And this is probably the most powerful machine that I have, and I'll put the specs up. So what my plan is, Windows is running on a 250 gigabyte SSD. So what I'm going to do is I've got a 4 terabyte drive here that has plenty of free space on it. So I'm going to try to shrink this drive and see if I can free up maybe 256 gigabytes. And then I'll install Linux on that free 256 gigabytes. So this 4 terabyte has music, video, backups, all the other stuff on my system, my Windows 10 system. But hopefully I can shrink this a little bit. Let's see what it's going to let me do. So it's a pretty big drive, so it's going to take a few minutes. Size available in megabytes. I really wish it'd put it in gigabytes. So it looks like I've got actually quite a bit of room here. I certainly don't need to give it 1.7 terabytes. I want to reserve that for the NTFS partition, which I could use in Linux. I can read and write to the NTFS partition anyway, so I'm going to take this down considerably. I only need, like I said, 256 gigabytes. So that's going to take quite a while. I'm going to go ahead and use the numeric keypad. And it should shrink it by 256,000 megabytes or 250 gigabytes. So I now have a 3.4, almost 3.5 gigabytes on the NTFS partition, and then a 250 gigabyte partition that I'm going to use for CentOS. So if you've been watching my previous videos, you know that I was saying I'm going to put Fedora 23 on here, but I've actually decided to do CentOS. And the reason behind that is my thinking with CentOS is the development for CentOS is long-term, and it follows Red Hat because it is basically Red Hat Linux. Whereas Fedora, the operating system, is released every 6 months, so it's constantly changing. And I'm going to use this as sort of a server, and I want something that doesn't change too much except for security fixes or packages that are necessary for what I'm going to be doing, which basically is going to be editing. I may create a Samba share, and if anybody is familiar with Samba, it is a Windows file server emulator, and I might do that. So I decided I want to experiment anyway with CentOS because I want to keep my knowledge set of Red Hat alive and well. So Fedora will still be my main system on my laptops. CentOS I will put on this particular system. So we are ready to reboot. Now, this system does not like the USB keyboard for whatever reason. It doesn't activate the USB bus fast enough, so I have to use a physical keyboard. So I'm going to go ahead and initiate the shutdown. Well, actually, I'm going to do a restart. And I have a physical keyboard here with me. So once it boots up, I've got to quickly look at the boot options. I do have the 32 gigabyte thumb drive that I created in my previous video. Delete to run setup. F9 for BBS pop-up. F12 for BIOS post flash. Well, I don't want to flash it. Not sure what BBS pop-up is. I guess we can give it a try. It's always interesting to find out new things when you're working on a computer. Honestly, if I did know what BBS pop-up is, I don't know what it is anymore. So I pressed F9. I get a funny feeling it's just going to go ahead and boot into Windows. We'll see. No, it did not. However, I only have my IDE and my 2 SATA drives. So apparently BBS F9 is indeed the boot device. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my USB drive over to 2.0, to the USB 2.0 bus, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I went ahead and added the thumb drive to the 2.0 bus. It looks like the my PCI Express add-on USB 3.0 card is not even activated until a little bit later. So that's very interesting. So that is a limitation of having a USB 3 add-on card. So I'm going to select this drive, and I'm hoping it's going to boot from it. And it did successfully. So I want to do install CentOS 7. It's been a while since I've went through the CentOS installer, so it'll be interesting to see what my options are. I also have to keep in mind that I'm pretty sure Windows is going to try to boot up by default. That may or may not be the case. Well, this isn't too encouraging. One doesn't like to see a blank screen. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and wait until I see something on the screen, hopefully. Alright, well, something did appear on the screen. It's actually simply a white screen. I'm really hoping this is encouraging. It is the USB 2.0 bus, so it might be extremely slow. Don't recall seeing this. Well, all computers are different. Can't tell if this is actually a kernel panic or if it's still doing something. Maybe I should have stayed with Fedora 23. Well, I can always switch back. That wouldn't be any problem. And another thought I had, whenever I see something like this happen, you know, I just rebooted from Windows, so this is a warm boot into Windows. I might be better off doing a cold boot, because not all the memory registers may have been freed up. I could have a couple more seconds here and see what happens, but I'm going to pause because no reason for you guys to sit and wait. Alright, we're going to try a warm boot, or excuse me, a cold boot here. So I'm pressing the F9 key, and shortly here it should pop into the boot menu. Okay, there it is. That's very curious. So I have a USB 2 extension cable, and I plugged my thumb drive into the extension cable, and just so I could unplug and plug in the extension or the USB drive easier. And now it's not being detected. Be right back. It's amazing how much exercise you get getting up and down when you're working on computers. Alright, hopefully it's going to show up now. And I'm hoping it's also going to boot up. If not, I guess my next option is to go into the BIOS settings and see if there's anything I can adjust. Okay, so let's try and boot from the USB again. I really don't think I need to do a test. And we'll try troubleshooting a little later if it comes to that. Well, it's not looking too promising. It's doing the exact same behavior as before. Not acting much like issue with a warm boot. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a kernel panic there. I'm going to give it about 2 minutes and see what happens. This is definitely a kernel panic. The keyboard is hard locked. I can't even get the numlock light to go off or on. It's actually on and it will not go off. Caps lock doesn't turn on, so it's definitely had a kernel panic. Alright, well, I've had no luck, so I've tried all the BIOS settings I could try. I'm going to try troubleshooting and see what we've got. I'm going to try the basic graphics mode. Maybe I'll get lucky with that. Alright, after many attempts to get the CentOS bootable USB to boot up, I wasn't successful. I did find some better settings for my USB port, so now I have full USB 2.0, where before it was running in legacy mode at 12 megabits, which probably explains some problems I was having with my Wi-Fi card, so I'm pretty excited about that. I can try my USB Wi-Fi also later. But anyway, so this USB drive is Fedora 23, and I just wanted to do a boot test and see if hopefully this one works. So by default it's going to try to start Fedora Live. CentOS was of course just going to run the install. So I'm going to press enter and let's see what happens. If I get the same behavior, then I'll have a better idea of what I'm dealing with at least. Alright, so I've got a blinking cursor in the corner. Oh. Nope, it definitely got past that step. Now I'm wondering if I should put CentOS on this other USB drive I have. Maybe it would actually work correctly. I'll let it boot up fully, and I think I will put CentOS on this USB thumb drive that I have and see if it makes any difference. Alright, well, it did boot up okay. Let's see if I actually have mouse. Yep, I do. So everything seems to be working. I'm going to go ahead and power it down. So I know now that I can at least do Fedora if I can't do CentOS. But I was kind of hoping to be able to do CentOS. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that USB drive, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've used the SanDisk USB drive, and I put CentOS on there, so I figured we'd give it a try. I don't really believe it's going to work anyway, but, well, gotta try, right? Here we go. Honestly, if it does work, I'm going to be very surprised. Okay, this is pretty typical. Looks like I'm locked up. The caps lock is no longer working on the keyboard. And I should get my kernel panic stack trace, and there it is. So I guess the bottom line is Fedora 24 is working, CentOS isn't. I'm just guessing there's something in the hardware that it doesn't like, and I'm not sure what at this point. And that's the latest image for CentOS, so I don't think I'm going to keep trying to pursue this any further. It really doesn't make any sense for me to. So I'll just stick with my original plan and go to Fedora 24. Excuse me, Fedora 23. Alright, well, here we are back at the boot menu, and I'm going to start the Fedora Live installation. Well, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and enter Fedora Live. Alright, well, I know I want to install it to the hard drive, so I'm going to go ahead and do the install. Now, I've done a Fedora 24 installation in one of my previous videos, so I'll put the link to that so that you can check that out. And I think what I'll do is just kind of quick step through this install. So I'm going to select English, continue. I need to select the destination. So if you recall, I made that partition available. So I'm going to use that partition. And just looking to make sure everything's in order. That's my actual thumb drive. No, actually that is my SSD. Curious. I'm wondering why it would not see that 256 gigabytes free that I made. So it's saying it's a 3.64 terabyte total, and it looks like it thinks all of it is taken up, and it's claiming these are all unknown, which they shouldn't be. This one especially, it should know this one as NTFS. These are all listed as NTFS, which is correct, but these are all showing up as unknown. Well, just goes to show that there's always a monkey wrench in your plans. So I'm not going to be able to do this yet. I'm going to have to go and check and ensure that the partitioning actually took place in Windows, because I don't want to make a mistake and lose all the data on my 4 terabyte drive. Well, it is definitely partitioned correctly, and it was committed. I see here I have a 250 gigabyte empty space on my 4 terabyte drive showing 3.4 gigabytes available. I'm a little nervous about shrinking it, but I do have a backup of it. So I think I'll look at it again and consider doing that shrink. Alright, well, I've hit a crossroads here. For whatever reason, Fedora, it cannot understand what the partitions are, and I cannot shrink. Well, of course, this is the SSD, so that doesn't count. Let's click this one, unclick that one, and then click Done. It doesn't know these file system types, and I'm thinking maybe it has something to do with the fact that this is a 4 terabyte drive. So I'm going to do a little research and find out what the problem is. I think I'm going to give up for tonight. However, I've been working on this for quite a while. So for you, you'll be back in just 1 second. For me, I'm going to start up again tomorrow. Well, looks like Linux, for whatever reason, refuses to see my 4 terabyte drive as NTFS partitions. So whenever we can't get any of the drives partitioned, and my current SSD, which is down here, is only it's about a 240 gig, I believe. It's basically full with Windows. So I got an idea. Why not put a new SSD in? So the one I have here is the SanDisk SSD Plus. This one is a 240 gigabyte, and I was able to get it on sale. So $64 for a 240 gigabyte. I am really hoping that I'm going to be able to still see the 4 terabyte drive when I finally get Linux installed and fully updated. So you got to keep that in mind that Fedora 23 has had quite a few updates at this point. And the other factor is if it doesn't work, I can go ahead and consider upgrading to Fedora 24, even if it's in beta right now, because you can go directly from the beta to the official. So 240 gigabyte SSD. Even if I couldn't see the 4 terabyte drive, it's really not that big of a deal. Boy, they make it really hard to get this sticker off. They mean business here. Because my main machine anyway is an i7 Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro, and it only has a 256 gigabyte mSATA in it, so quite frankly it's good enough, even for video editing. Usually I just plug in an external USB drive for backups, but I'm able to do quite a few videos anyway, so so there's my drive. I'm going to use the unofficial mounting method, Scotch shipping tape to the rescue, because I really don't have any more room free. This drive down here is actually resting on a platform, so that's perfectly fine. But if I were to put it here, I don't have a 3.5 inch adapter for this, so I'm just going to do it nice and easy for me. I've already got an open cable here, and I've got an open power supply for my SanDisk. So I think I'll just go ahead and plug these in. Power is off, so no concerns. Now, one of the tricks I like to use is turning the plug bar off or turning the power supply off on the back so that the unit is still grounded and the power lead is cut off. It's not a bad idea to do the switch and the plug bar at the same time. I really hate getting the power in. I'm always afraid I'm going to break something. It just doesn't want to go in easily. There we go. Well, I don't have to worry about that coming out anytime soon. So I'm just going to trace this, make sure my USB cable is firmly planted. And I'm going to put this one on the bottom of the case here. One of the downsides of that is, of course, if there's any violent injury to the bottom of the case, it could damage the drive, but I really doubt that's going to happen. It does have feet on it, and I am pretty careful. So I don't want the surface sticker to get damaged, so I'm going to tape only on the plastic areas. Plus, it'll allow better heat dissipation. So I'm actually only taping on the plastic chassis. And I'm going to grab another piece here. And do much the same thing. And I think I'll put one more piece right here. This is what I love about SSDs. They're so darn light. I don't even feel guilty about doing this. If this was a regular drive, a regular 3.5 inch drive, I would be saying, okay, I'm going to do this. I'll set the drive in there to do a quick test, but after that, it's got to be mounted correctly. There's no way I'm going to leave a 3.5 inch drive mounted. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get everything powered up, and we're going to start our install. Alright, we're ready to go. I'm hitting the power button on the computer. Woo! Keyboard's very cold. And I'm going to press F9. F9, of course, gets me into the boot up. So I can select the thumb drive for booting. Alright, so I'm going to go back to the USB SanDisk. And I'm going to start Fedora Live. Honestly, I'm really glad that I bought this drive because it's going to be a lot faster anyway. And I like having a completely discrete and separate drive from Windows. So I honestly don't have to worry about either one. I can boot from either drive and do whatever it is I need to do. So that'll be awesome. Alright, it didn't take but a few seconds for it to boot up. So I'm going to say install the hard drive. And I will use a video capture software tool in the future. But up through the benchmarking, I don't want to use a capture tool because I know it does degrade benchmarking. Alright, so I'm going to click continue here. Oh, I really need something that I can use as a mouse pad. There we go. Alright, so it says no disk selected. And okay, so this one's showing 223 gigabytes free on my SSD. This is the one that was installed first, also known as SDA, Serial Device A, in Linux or Unix, and it shows me that I only have 3.56 megabytes free, so I confirm that this one is my Windows drive. This one is the new one. This is my 4 terabyte drive, and finally this one is of course the SanDisk USB drive. So I'm going to select this disk. I don't need to make additional space available. I want it to automatically configure the partition, and I want it to use the entire drive. Not this one. This has got all my goodies on it. So I'll click done. Alright. New York time zone is fine. I do have a physical connection currently. A little bit later I'm gonna test my Wi-Fi. I bought a newer AC Wi-Fi to go with the router I have here. So it's gonna let me begin installation, and I can see that it's moving pretty fast. So while it's working, I'm gonna go ahead and set my root password. This password, it's claiming it's weak, but it's actually quite decent. So it wants me to enter it twice. I'm going to create a basic user. Whoops. Looks like cap lock is on. I am going to make this user an administrator, which is a Windows term. In reality, I am making this user a member of the sudoers group. And I need to enter this user's password. Again, it's complaining about the password, but it's actually pretty good. Now, when I click done, watch what happens. I click it once, and it's like, you know, I actually have a message at the bottom. I'm going to scroll down just a bit. It says, you've provided a weak password. The password fails the dictionary check. It's based on a dictionary word. It's really not at all. Press done again to use it anyway. So I've been warned. And I'll click done. And it's at about 30%. It's actually doing quite well as far as installations go, so that's encouraging. The faster the better. I would really like this system to be as quick as possible because I'm going to use it as my video editing system. If you've seen my recent videos, you know I've been using Kdenlive almost exclusively. I do plan on doing some 4K tests with iMovie with my MacBook Pro 2011 i5 with 16 gigs of RAM and a 480 gigabyte SSD. I have a video coming out where I did a 4K test with Kdenlive, and it was near to impossible to use. So mainly for playback. I was actually able to edit and everything in it, but it was pretty tough. So I'll be releasing that video as well fairly soon, where I talk about all the problems that I had. It really wasn't that I had very many problems, it was just even my i7 system was really too sluggish. So I'm very curious to see how 4K video does in iMovie on that early 2011 MacBook Pro. Software's at about 64%. I'm going to pause this, and when it gets done, I'll come back. Alright, so the install is completed. See if I can get my mouse back here. Everything seemed to go really well. It took about, I really didn't time it, but I would say maybe 4 minutes. So I'm going to click quit. Now, keeping in mind I'm in the live CD right now, so in order to see my actual installation, I need to do a restart. One of the things I need to do, remember I shrunk the partition size of my 4 terabyte drive, so I'm going to boot into Windows first and fix that. So I'm going to go ahead and do a reboot, and I'll fix that, and then I'll boot back into Fedora and meet you on the other side. Alright, I'm in the process of rebooting right now from Windows, so the change was successful. I was able to set my drive again. Now, by default, I would expect it to boot into Linux, but this first time, just to be safe, I'm going to go ahead and do F9 and make sure that I do go right into the drive. Okay, so I also know that this second SSD is the actual Linux drive, so if I click it, it actually gives me the options of doing Fedora, the Rescue, and Windows 8, which I'm not going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and boot into Fedora. Now, I have other videos for how I have changed my Linux install from the default, and I'm not going to duplicate that here. I'm going to go ahead and do my changes, and I will reference the video where I actually changed everything, the background and other things that I did. But I will go through a couple more things here. I'm just going to finish my setup. I do usually connect my Google account. I'm not going to do that right now. I'll just do a skip. So technically I'm ready to use Fedora. I'm sure it's able to get on the internet. Let's find out. Whoops, wrong button. The mouse I'm using is not the best. Let's try again. Alright, well, it does look like we're online. There's Mozilla, there's Fedora Project. So the first thing that I usually do, and this is the last thing I'm going to do for this video, is okay, so I added terminal to my favorites, so if I go over here I now have terminal. I'll put this, whoops, in the center of the screen. Make everything a little bit bigger. I'm going to become root, clear the screen, and the first thing I like to do is an update, because there's usually quite a few, well, okay, there's not a lot of bugs, but there are definitely some bugs that have been fixed. So I'm going to run DNF update -y. Go ahead and do my updates. Once all the updates are completed, I will install KDE and Kdenlive, which will be in another video that I'm going to do, and do a benchmark. So I've got that 4K video. I'm going to test with the 4K video. I know the timing for the Lenovo Yoga 2 i7, so I can compare that, and we're going to get an idea of just how fast this system is. So far I'm really happy. This system is hardwired into my router, and it does have 16 gigs of RAM, and it is overclocked, so it pretty much has the best of everything. So there will be a part 2. Keep your eyes posted. Usually release them within 2 or 3 days of each other, so you won't be waiting very long. For those of you who have stuck around with me, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.